Hello and welcome back to OT the Podcast. We're here for a thrilling, exciting and stimulating discussion about watches time and how to spend it. My name is Felix Schultz and I'm with...
Andy Green. Felix, you've got me excited. What's happening?
There's very good reason to be excited. We have the lovely, the charming and the erudite Asher Rapkin coming up as a guest in a little bit. You may know him as one of the co-founders of the watch enthusiast group collective. We'll find out all about what that is and why you can't join it, and also about their new limited edition, which is pretty out of this world.
Pretty exciting. Oh, you might know him from Facebook as well, because he's quite a big deal over there. So yeah, and he's just a lovely guy. So I can't wait for everyone to hear that.
Yeah, so that's fun.
Before we get into that, Felix, you've been shooting all kinds of wild conspiracy theories my way, but one stands out. What's going on with this?
You should know this because we've known each other for many years now. I love a good conspiracy theory. Do you have a favourite conspiracy theory, Andy?
No, I don't, but I know you do.
I've got quite a few.
Yeah.
Up to now, I'm a big fan of gold hidden in East German rail tunnels. But I think I've got a new one, Andy.
What's that?
It's called Birds Aren't Real. Did you know this? Did you realize that in the 50s, the CIA removed all the birds in the world and replaced them with robot surveillance drones?
So birds are not real?
Nope.
They're drones?
Have you ever wondered why birds sit on power lines so often, Andy Green?
Often. I often do.
It's because they're recharging. Have you ever wondered why you don't see? You think about how many birds they say there are out there in the world. Why don't you see all the dead birds?
So, what are chickens then?
That's a training program. It's
ground drones.
It's part of a ruse. It's, obviously I don't know, to be honest. But I've come across this sort of little meme thing on the internet every so often, and obviously it was tailor-made for Felix's specific set of interests. So I dug a little deeper and I discovered the truth, Andy Green.
Yep. What's the truth?
The truth is, it looks like it's some young hip dude that is having fun with some viral marketing and selling some merch, which makes me kind of love it even more because it's that whole that's what QAnon's all about. It's about selling merch to people that are gullible, enough to believe some of that wild stuff. But this is sort of a bit more of a fun take. Like it's not as
birds aren't real.
Yeah, so birdsaren'treal.com, discover the truth. There's a deep and in-depth and entirely legitimate history about the whole government scam. I'm amazed they haven't taken the website down, you could. It's kind of a clever way of poking fun at that whole conspiracy theory, fake news thing.
I do have a favorite conspiracy.
Oh yeah,
we've talked about it before. You've triggered me with the CIA talk, but it was one of our very first episodes. Yes. We talked about the theory that the CIA had used Winds of Change by Scorpion to trigger change in like East Germany whenever it was like the 70s
pro-democratic sentiment.
Like this
American
really
rock.
Positive messaging. Yeah, and this podcast by a guy named Patrick Radden-Keefe, who's a really kind of well-known author and journalist in the States. So we should definitely link up that podcast because it is fascinating and that's up my alley.
Is that conspiracy theory or is that like just legit? Because maybe I'm sort of outing my own belief systems here. I just think that that's something that probably would have just happened.
Potentially, but until it's confirmed, it's a conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah, I guess. What have you been up to?
Well, I've been watching a bit of Netflix, as some of the world might know. Melbourne's back in lockdown again. I've been watching a show on Netflix called Big Timber.
I'm a bit hesitant to ask based on what you were watching on Netflix last week.
This is just a look at the lumber business. It's a really interesting
burly
insight.
men in plaid.
Well, this is like proper like mountainside timber claiming. So it basically follows like a logger of a sawmill. His name is Kevin Westop. And he's got like this sawmill, and they go up and they buy like lots on the mountainside, and that's their job to sort of extract the big timber and then truck it down. And
big timber's like large trees. That's
like big cedar trees, like that weigh like 20 tons. So they've got this like really sophisticated like crane system that sort of pulls it up and is very scary to watch. But the owner is just like, at the start you think he's this really kind of nice, wholesome guy, and then he just sort of turns out to be a bit of a dick to everyone around him.
Is this like ice road truckers for trees?
Kind of. And he's also very like hands-on and very handy. So he'll just be like, oh yeah, I've got this barge and it's like half sunk. So then he spends like the day
Fixing it.
resurrecting the barge, and then he keeps like goes down the river and finds like some old tractor that he's had there for like, 3 years and just like fixes it. So it's pretty entertaining to watch.
Do they talk about this? Is given that it's an American show,
It's Canadian.
Canadian. Okay, do they talk about like the sustainability of it, or like that sort of like logging and forestry, any of that sort of stuff?
Not really, but you get the vibe that it is done in a sustainable way because they sort of use everything, so that you do get that appreciation for,
Yeah,
I
this is
think,
not
timber as a product. So it's
being
like
turned into
these ones that,
fantastic furniture.
yeah. So you learn that like this is like the top tier stuff, and then this is going to end up as kindling. This is going to end up as sawdust. This is going to end up as. So I think there's actually very little wastage, because
Interesting.
like it starts with him spending $1.5 million on like this lot of fallen timber on the side of a mountain that he has to then get out, sell, and all the sort of logistical troubles that he has, which
Fascinating.
I love.
That actually sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, big timber,
Um,
everyone.
Big Timber on Netflix. Check it out. Don't type it into Google necessarily. This week's episode is brought to you by Tag Heuer. Tag Heuer has given the Aquaracer a significant update this year. Let's find out a little bit about it.
Significant indeed. There is more to Tag Heuer than chronographs. Did you know that Tag Heuer has been making dive watches since 1978?
Really?
Really. And their journey into dive watches started with a model called the Reference 844, but we will get to that in a moment.
So Tag Heuer's given the Aquaracer some comprehensive updates this year. Andy, you've had a look, I've had a look, and from my point of view, I've got to say that the Aquaracer is looking better than ever.
I can agree. What specifically are we looking at in the update department here, Felix?
Okay, so the main thing is a slimmer, more refined case. There's chamfered sides that feel better on the wrist, and they have that nice, cool, reflective interplay of light element going on. The date Cyclops now sits underneath the crystal, and the dial has been slightly refined with updated indexes. The bracelet is another significant upgrade. There's improved ergonomics and a very nice sliding buckle that allows for up to 1.5 centimeters of on-the-go adjustment, which is perfect for a wetsuit. And with 300-meter water resistance, you could well wear with this watch with a wetsuit.
Yeah, fantastic. And in terms of new models, we've actually been treated to a bunch. In the 43mm size, there are black, blue, and silver versions, the latter having a glossy black ceramic bezel and matching hour surrounds for a really high contrast look. There are also smaller 36mm models with wavy dial patterns that are also available in blue, black, and silver. The blue one actually has 8 diamond hour markers for a bit of extra sparkle.
Nice. And these are just the regular core collection Aquaracers. There's 2 special new sort of releases that are doing things a little bit different, aren't there?
Yep, remember that Reference 844 that we talked about? Well, Tag Heuer have made a really nice vintage-inspired tribute with vintage-style loom, a red inner 24-hour scale, and a period-correct rally-style strap-in rubber. I've actually gone hands-on with this model and will link up some of my picks, but to put it as succinctly as possible, it's super cool and super limited.
Absolutely, I love it. And my pick, though, is a little bit different. It's 43mm, it's matte, it's lightweight titanium, and it's got a green dial with green ceramic bezel. It's really cool, but one detail that I really, really appreciated was the fact that the bezel ceramic had a radial brush, which I think is just quite sophisticated.
I have to agree. I think it's a pretty sophisticated package all round. And in terms of price, so the titanium one is 6,100 Aussie dollars. The limited edition is 6,300 Aussie dollars, while the steel 43mm models on the bracelet are 4,350, and of course those 36mm models, we can't forget about those. Those are 4,100 Aussie dollars.
Nice, Andy. That's a very tidy package.
Absolutely, Felix. To discover more about the new Tag Heuer Aquaracer, head to tagheuer.com or to your local Tag Heuer boutique.
Now, Andy, we're going to get back to the show. I've also been doing that. I've been watching a lot of Netflix, playing a bit of Zelda on the Switch,
Okay.
but I've also been doing some writing, Andy. And I think by the time this is published, what I've just written should have been published. Another article for A Collected Man, our good friends Silas and the team, Russell over there, shout out. 5 places that have changed watchmaking.
Okay, 5 places.
What do you? Not 5 places. 5 places.
Still on that wood note. Okay, what do I think the 5 places are?
Yeah,
that have
like I
changed
mean,
watchmaking?
genuinely, like so. I sort of worked up a bit of a list and submitted that, and we back and forth on some really interesting and unusual choices. But what do you think? Like, and I'm not talking about. I'm going to take like watchmaking factories out of the equation.
Okay, so like locations.
Yeah.
So like Villeray?
Yeah, this is like, I'll give you one. We talked about Greenwich, like
Okay.
Greenwich Mean Time, and how that became a thing, and
Hmm.
how that sort of changed watchmaking, I suppose. Yeah, what do you reckon? Any choices?
I would say that Geneva's got to be on there.
Sure.
Glasuke.
Yeah, did they change watchmaking though?
Oh, okay. That's controversial.
I mean, they didn't. Not in a, I'm just the one that I sort of thought about that we thought was a bit too obvious and we didn't end up including was the moon.
Mm.
Like
Did
getting
you
there.
include the sun?
No, we did. I did talk more than I normally talk about celestial navigation.
Why don't you tell me the 5 places that change watchmaking, in your opinion?
Well, this is between me and the Collective Man team. So
Mm-hmm.
we went with Greenwich.
Mm-hmm.
We went with a Madeira, which is an island off the coast of Africa, and that is where John Harrison's son took the first marine chronometer that predicted longitude and like made an actual functional prediction that sort of
Uh-huh.
changed timekeeping in that way. That's where the celestial navigation came in. What else did I talk about? I talked about racetracks, Daytona, Sebring, and Le Mans,
Okay.
for a few various reasons there. What else did I talk about? Neuchatel Observatory, with a very specific reason that's one of my favourite little watchmaking stories. And was there another one? Surely there was another one. Greenwich,
Yep.
Neuchatel, racetracks, something else. God, the other one was probably the most important.
We'll link it up.
Yeah, let's link it up.
Felix, the time has come.
The war has said.
It is. It's time to get Asher on.
Let's do it. Today's guest is the co-founder of Collective, a private watch community born in 2019 that does more than talk about watches. They also release them. Brands like Zenith, J.N. Shapiro, and most recently Urwerk. Welcome to OT, Asher Rapkin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, guys. It's really a pleasure.
Asher, it's our absolute pleasure. And look, you've done what many have been afraid to do. You've purchased a watch that is sort of a secret crush of mine. The Yachtmaster in Rollersaw. Tell us about it.
Oh, my God. Well, you want to start there?
That's the icebreaker.
Oh, man. Yeah. So I saw that watch for the first time. I think, what was it, 2015 release? And I think that's the first time that I looked at a watch remotely that expensive and actually began to think, how can I make that happen?
Yeah.
No, the Yachtmaster 1 Rollersaur is, in my opinion, like the pinnacle of the modern Rolex sports catalog. And I realized lots of people are going to raise their eyebrows saying that. Like, what about a sub? But I think it encapsulates so much of what makes modern Rolex great.
Yeah,
it has a unique point of view, and it's not trying to be anything other than itself. It is a luxury sports watch, and it is one that defines the market. It's made of an absolutely gorgeous material. The alloy fades to almost white in the sun, and it's this beautiful sort of golden rose when you're indoors. It's utterly legible. There's all that catnip in there for collectors, what with the red text on the dial and so forth. The bezel and relief is magnificent. The weight of it is fabulous. And for all those people who sort of like raise their eyebrows at Oysterflex, I would argue that is, I will side with Rolex on this one, that it is definitively a bracelet and not a strap. And when you put it all together, it's just this pretty fantastic synesthetic experience that, will probably entice people into the store to spend a truly shocking amount of money to buy something absolutely fabulous.
Yep.
It's great.
Yep, I'm with you on that. Except, I do find the Oysterflex bracelet hyperbole a tad. It's very Rolex. What I mean?
Come to my marketing camp and let me indoctrinate you.
It's a bracelet with a nickel core, and it's a unique blend of synthetic and natural elastomers.
And you're like, no, man, it's rubber. It's rubber and titanium. Go away.
Oh, it's a great watch. It's a great watch.
It is. I recently picked up the white gold Daytona on Oysterflex, and I actually
nice.
I don't really like Daytonas, to be completely honest with you, because I like to use my chronographs, and screw down pushers makes that very difficult.
Sure.
But I feel like I can check off, functionality when you're looking at a watch like that, because again, it's, you're not wearing that as a tool. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
it's
100%.
just a cool piece of kinetic art.
Yeah. Now, I think the follow-up question, the natural follow-up question to Andy's beloved Rolex is about Collective.
Yeah.
What is it?
So Collective is a community of watch enthusiasts that are held together by collaborative watches. And my partner Gabe Riley and I founded Collective about 2.5 years ago because we were born of the internet generation of watch collectors, which was for many, many years, and to a degree still is, a very inclusive community, and a very welcoming community. But what we noticed over the last 3 years or so, 4 years or so, is that as the tent has gotten significantly bigger, the opportunity for forging close relationships has gotten more challenging. And certainly through COVID, I think this has become true, where we've seen the community come together, but we've also seen a lot of negativity and trolling, and just all the things that make communicating on the internet challenging. So we wanted to create a space where people could come together regardless of what their collection size or value or even interest was, and share in a joint love of horology. And we thought that the best way to do that, in addition to building a space in that regard, was to also follow our personal passion of telling stories through art. And that's where we started looking at collaborative watches, of which we make 2 series, the Collective series and the Portfolio series. And the Collective series are watches that every single member has an allocation. So no one has to wake up at midnight, to reload their webpage and hope to buy it. If you're a member, you will always have an allocation. And we tend to price those watches as best we can at 10,000 or under. It can be challenging, but we do our best, US. And then the Portfolio series, which is focused on independent watchmaking. And that the production numbers there are limited simply by the total number of production that a specific maker can actually accommodate. And that's an area that's really a focus of mine. Gabe is very focused on the Collective line, and I'm very focused on the Portfolio line.
That's fantastic, and we will dive into some of those collaborations in a moment. But what I'm curious to ask you is, the watch scene is spoiled for choice when it comes to community. So why did you want to start a new one?
Yeah, so both Gabe and I are marketers by trade. I've worked in marketing for 22 years, and Gabe in advertising for about the same amount of time. And I'm a big believer that just because something exists already, or there's a group out there, that does something similar, doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to say something new. And I think what makes collaboration so fantastic at its core is that in the end, it's the ideas that really carry the work. And you could have, all manner of different community that cater to different kinds of interests and different kinds of watches. But for us, so much of the energy that we pour into the work comes into the collaboration, and we focus so much on the idea of what we're trying to do that we feel like that's a differentiator. But, I would also say that there's a place for all manner of different kinds of community. And I love that about the watch world. I'm an active participant in my local Red Bar chapter, for example. And I love Red Bar. Red Bar is a lot of fun, and I look forward to going out to the bars again and hanging out with folks. And that's very much like, a loose hang kind of thing. And that's what makes Red Bar so unique. When we do events, we also focus on, a very specific concept that's executed in a very particular way. And that's different than what a lot of other people do. And, but at the same time, I think having diversity in the communities that you participate in and the things that exist is a good thing. So I don't think the fact that other folks are out there is necessarily a detractor for anybody that might be thinking about, building something of their own.
That's all, true, I suppose, and it makes perfect sense to me. But one thing I find really the most striking difference, I suppose, for me about Collective, as I'm not a part of it, is that I don't know what's going on because it's private.
Yet, Felix, yet.
This is why
you're scheduled for your induction ceremony in only a few weeks there, so you need to prepare.
The hood goes over your head, you get thrown in the back of a van, and
yeah, we don't talk about that part.
Dear. We're not allowed to. That's the first rule of Collective. Why? So why is it private? What's the thinking there?
Well, we have some collectors who have. Well, I'm thinking of one collector in particular who's been collecting for 25 years, maybe more, and an extraordinarily extensive collection. Who doesn't feel very comfortable sharing in a public setting. So I think that's part of it.
Shout out to Joe.
Not everybody is as open on it. Is as open and wanting to participate in forums like Instagram, for example. And for me, Instagram is a place that I spend a truly disproportionate amount of time. But I appreciate that's not necessarily something that attracts every collector. The other thing is we believe very strongly in wanting people to feel comfortable and to speaking their mind and doing so in a place where they're not worried about having that quoted or screen shared or something to that effect. We have several members who are in the industry themselves, one who works for a very large, well-known brand, some who own their own stores and are authorized dealers, and also watch enthusiasts themselves. And part of the rules of the community are when you step inside of collective, you're an enthusiast. You're not a brand advocate. You're not a salesperson.
Sales guy. Yep.
Yeah, and those folks really look for that too. I mean, it can be very. I know it sounds weird to play a small violin for authorized dealers, but a lot of these people got into this out of passion themselves, and they're just as sick about being asked for a sub or a Daytona as anybody else, and are just as hungry for interesting horological conversation as the rest of the community. So a lot of the private nature of it comes from wanting to make sure that members feel comfortable talking about whatever they want to whomever they want within the group. And that's part of the reason why membership is confidential too. We don't share names of who's in the group. If someone wants to say that they are, that's great. But we don't share that.
That's really cool. And can you give us a sense of how many members you have? Like, are we talking,
Oh, sure.
Hundreds, thousands, millions?
Millions.
Millions.
Everybody.
It's very exclusive.
No. So we're small. We're going to double in size this year, actually. Right now we're a group of 75 people.
Cool.
And we're going to grow to 150 this year.
That's
How
cool.
how do we join?
Yeah, so joining is done through an application process, which is a sentence that my friend Gabe and I literally always roll our eyes at ourselves when we say it because it sounds awful.
I'm rolling my eyes at you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just fill out this simple application and we'll get back to you. Well, the reason we do that is not to be exclusive. I mean, the reason we do it is that we are genuinely interested in understanding somebody's interest in joining collective. And I will say right now, definitively, the size of your collection, the value of your collection, or even the duration of your collecting history is of minimal interest to us. What we are really curious to hear about is what attracts you to joining such a community and what you love about horological and kinetic art that would bring you to our front door and that would make you want to join. So we bring new members on board every time we release a new watch. So the number of slots that are available for new members is dependent essentially on how many watches are purchased by our members at any given time, and then the delta is what we welcome new members in on. So on larger releases, there's more slots, for example. So the watch that the watch we're going to talk about today, the Urwerk, there's 20 pieces. Not many membership slots on that, just mathematically speaking. But the watch that we'll be doing in September, there's 125. October, there's 125 pieces. So there'll be a lot of opportunity to join on that one.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, interesting. And so you're obviously based in California. Do you take on international members?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, in October, one of the things that we're very focused on is expanding into our second global hub, which is going to be based out of London.
Okay.
We've seen a lot of interest from UK-based members. We have a small contingency of really fabulous UK-based members, and a lot of people reaching out from that region in particular. The majority of our members are here in the United States, but we have members in Australia. We have members in the Philippines. We have members in Europe, in England, in several other countries around the world. But and we love that. I mean, that really expands the community quite significantly, and especially in this last year has been wonderful because it's been a great way to stay connected to everybody as we've all been stuck at home.
Yeah, it's really cool. It sounds awesome. And I didn't know you had members in Australia, but say you had to like pick one more, and Felix and I both put an application in, who would you choose?
That's rude.
Come on, man. Okay, my official answer is I would have to review your applications with equal care, and
That's
the
a good
membership
answer.
committee would review them. So that's actually another really interesting point that I'm going to use to dodge your question.
Tell us about it.
Which is, it's not just Gabe and me who picks new members. We have a rotating membership committee, and you can't be on the membership committee twice in a row. And we do that because we want to make sure that we, one, are bringing in diverse new members, and two, that decision never really sits with just one person. So it's not like if you want to become a member of Collective, you gotta send a case of beer to Asher.
Okay.
It's more if you want to become a member of Collective. I beg pardon?
It's a case of Daytonas.
Exactly. Send me a flight of Daytonas. But no, the point is, like, I actually am just one vote. And our committee is usually between 4 to 5 people. And the goal of that is to really make sure that we're not bringing in the same kinds of people, that we really are trying to be as diverse as we can. And we encourage members to actively participate in the membership committee too, so that they can have a voice in what their community looks like.
What I find interesting here is, in some ways, the amount of thought that has clearly gone into the infrastructure of this group. Like, oftentimes a watch group will be like, hey, I'm starting a new watch group. It's going to be called the Melbourne Watch Crew. Apologies if that's really a thing. I don't know.
Probably is.
Oh dear.
I'll mute that.
And then it sort of, it starts off well. There's a few core guys, and then it lacks momentum and sort of peters out. How do you keep an online community, happy and healthy and growing, if that's what you want it to do? Asking as someone who has just started an OT Discord.
Oh man, we should talk about that on the side, because picking the platform that you run your community on is really an interesting and challenging question. In Discord, I'm sorry, do you say you started on Discord or on
Discord?
Yeah, interesting. Okay, we should talk about that.
We can talk about that now if you want.
Okay, well, we should talk about that then, because that's actually an interesting topic. But let's stick a pin in that on the technical side. So 2 things. First of all, one of the ways is that Collective is a business, and we're very transparent about this. We operate and we run it as a business because it requires a significant amount of time and energy, and Gabe and I have poured hundreds of thousands of hours into this business, as well as a not insignificant amount of our own money to really build it. And by building it and running it as a business, it helps us do what we want to do. I mean, that's really why it is a business. It helps us do what we want to do for the members. It allows us to have working capital to produce events. It allows us to have working capital to produce prototypes and to do things the way that we want them done, to do the travel that's necessary, to spend the time. I have 2 kids. My partner has 1 kid. We don't have extra time. So to make it work, we have to make it into something that holds attention and has the resources necessary. So that's one side of it. The second side of it, around how you keep a community vibrant, I think it's 100% who's in that community. There's a lot of different philosophies about this, and you can look at different groups, all across Facebook, for example. And there are folks that post daily prompts or have, it's like it's Speedy Tuesday day, or it's Moser Monday or Fume Friday or what have you. And these are prompts that encourage engagement. But I'm a big believer that if you spend the time to really get the right people in the right place, that conversation will drive itself, and that community becomes organic. And that comes back around to why we're a membership driven organization. We've never had to prompt our community. It's always alive and talking, because people feel comfortable being able to go there and utilize it as a resource. And I think that's the key. And that's honestly one of the most challenging parts of running Collective, is really being thoughtful about how we grow, at what pace we grow, and who's there.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and we appreciate the transparency. Obviously, yeah, we're a business as well, so we totally understand it. We understand that when you're kind of spending your additional hours building something, whatever it is, or creating something, then you kind of, you need to have something in it for yourself as well. But it's not, purely a for profit business. There is a charitable element to what you do, and we want to talk about that in a moment. I guess you've talked about selecting people and sort of, I guess, how do you balance community and business and sort of maintain that line with your members who obviously know that it is a hub of activity, but also there is a business element.
Well, we're very transparent. We're always very transparent about what we do and how we do it and why we're doing the things that we're doing. And we never, ever, ever do things without member permission that would involve their information. So I'll give you a couple examples. So for the Urwerk, there are 20 that that are being sold, but we produced 24. One that is for me, one that's for Gabe. We had originally from here, I just told you guys how we're a business, and now I'm gonna tell you how we're like, this is why we're not going to be super successful, because both of us decided to buy one. You're like, oh man. But aside from that, 2 are going to both Gabe and myself. And then 1 is going to our retail partner because he's enamored with it. And 1 is actually going to the US distributor of Urwerk because he was so in love with it. But we always make sure that we tell our members that 20 are for sale, but 24 were produced. Yep. And that transparency, I think, is really important. Whenever we do an event, for example, with a manufacturer or with we just did an event, for example, with an auction house. Whenever, we always allow members to have full access to whomever is coming to speak, but it's not the other way around. And we would never just provide names or Instagram handles or contact information or any of that. We don't sell mailing lists. We don't do sponsorship mailers. We don't do any of that. So it's not, we don't run the organization. We don't monetize our members, to use the parlance of the marketing world. Instead, what we're trying to do is find really interesting opportunities that we think they would like, and then we invite them to it. And everybody opts into each opportunity uniquely. So just because you're a member of Collective doesn't mean you're just going to get bombarded with stuff from us. And that's really important to us in keeping the community pure, so that when you get an email from Collective or you see a post in the group that you always want to open it.
So being a member, obviously you don't have to, there's sort of this opt-in to opportunities. Do I have to buy every watch that comes my way? How does it work? How do I kind of maintain membership?
No, you don't. There are no fees to be a Collective member. The only thing that is, there's 2 things that are required in order to stay a member in good standing. The first is we have a list of very straightforward house rules, and we hold everybody to those standards. The punchline of the house rules are be decent and be respectful. That's pretty much the core of it. The other half of it is in order to stay a member, we ask that you invest in one of our watches, either C or P, every 24 months. Okay. And that's why we try to do our best to make sure that the C series remains at attainable pricing, so that nobody ever feels that their back is against the wall and they have to spend $62,500 to purchase an Urwerk in order to stay a member. That's absolutely not something I want someone to ever feel. And I also don't want someone to feel like they have to buy a watch they don't want. Our hope is that at least one of our watches every 2 years will appeal to a member. And in doing so, that keeps us on our toes to ensure that the watches that we create are diverse in not just price, but also perspective. And hopefully that creates enough of a draw that folks want to stay on board.
That's really interesting, and it sort of segues really nicely into something I was going to ask about. Does the group get involved in the design or the process to work with brands? Like, can you say you've done a Zenith in the past? Did you put a post out saying, "Hey guys, what collaborations would you love to see? Here's a list of 3." Anything like that, or is it entirely driven from by you and Gabe?
So when we first started, and again, I preface by saying, we come from the world of marketing and advertising, and much of that space is about, being so thoughtful and focused on how you tell the story of a launch, which means keeping everything very much under wraps. Mm-hmm. And what we learned from our members through feedback over the last couple of years is, that's fun when you're outside of the group. When you're in the group, you really want to get a little bit more of a window into what's happening. So we've adjusted a little bit. Our members know the manufacturers that we're working with in advance of the public by many, many, many months. But we still reveal the watch and its concept as we get closer. And that's not just because we're trying to keep things close to the belt. It's because, quite candidly, things happen, as you're designing these pieces, and things adjust and change. And, I don't ever want to be in a situation where I say, I'm going to deliver X, and then 6 months later, a very different watch comes out and folks are like, what is that? And you have to explain, oh, well, we tried this process and that material didn't hold up, or this particular concept had to be shifted, et cetera. It's not something that we want to do. So I think it's more important that folks know approximate price points and the makers. In terms of design, that does sit exclusively with myself and Gabe. And that's for a few reasons. The first is, Gabe likes to forget whose quote this is, but he likes to remind me that a camel is a horse designed by committee.
Yep.
And, it's true. And I think part of the challenge is this is again, comes back to why we built ourselves as a business. It takes a lot of time and effort, not just to pitch, but to conceive and then to execute these watches. And, I think that people don't always think about the literal everyday of it. The conference calls, the 6 a.m. calls with Switzerland to go over schematics and technical drawings, the excitement of receiving a prototype, and then the dashed hopes when you realize that there's a critical flaw that's going to set you back and cost you another $20,000 to find a new supplier, and all of these things. And having some, in order for somebody to really participate, they would need to participate in the entire process of it. And that's asking someone to be involved in a second job. So yeah. I would never say that we wouldn't involve a collective member in a design process. But I would just say, if we were to, they would need to commit to that level of involvement in order for it to work. And we've talked a lot about this with the group too, because it's a question that's come up a lot. And what's interesting is very, very few people are actually, within the group actually, challenged that. It was, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think the folks that really want to make something, there's two things to remember. You can. There are so many wonderful watchmakers out there that will work with you to make something, and we hardly have a monopoly on that. And the second is, if you want to, you can always raise your hand, and we can figure out a way for someone to participate. But it's just important to think through the reality of the day-to-day of it.
Yeah, fascinating. So you mentioned, there's a lot of working with brands, and some of the houses that you've worked with, Zenith, Moser, obviously Urwerk, which we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. Are you at the point where you're actually being pitched by these companies to work with them, or are you still sort of kind of coming up with the concepts yourself and being really proactive?
We're being proactive.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, one of the things that we've learned in the last over the last few projects is, the best partners don't necessarily fall in the bucket of like who are our dream collaborators. And I don't mean that as an insult to anyone we've worked with. I mean, everyone we've worked with is incredible. What I mean is, I think a lot of people start by saying like, I want to make a Tudor, or I want to make a Rolex.
I want to work with Philip Dufour.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you might knock on those doors, and if they even open to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that those people are going to be a good collaborator. Because what we've learned is that there's a very significant distinction between asking someone to make a limited edition and asking someone to make a collaborative watch. And there's a place for both. I love variations on a theme of some of my favorite watches, and limited editions provide that. A collaborative watch is a co-designed or co-conceived, I should say, project. And that requires a lot more time and effort, and therefore cost, on the side of both the watchmaker and the collaborators. So what we really are looking for when we're talking to partners are who's going to be a really exciting collaborator, who's going to want to lean into that work, versus whose work do we necessarily admire and we want to pursue. We certainly knock on some of those doors, but we've definitely gotten way more no's than yeses. And I think over time we've learned in those initial conversations we can to determine if this is going to go the way that we hope it will, or if these folks make phenomenal watches and they just aren't interested in collaboration, which is totally fine too. So that's become our litmus test. And there are some makers that have approached us, but I'd say the same test applies. It's like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to speak to the community through a slight variation on one of their watches, and they see us as an opportunity to do that? Or are they coming to us because they were excited by something they saw creatively and they think that they could do something really interesting too? And I think we tend to want to go towards the latter.
Absolutely. Now, and this is related, and I'm sure there's lots of fairly sensible answers to this question, but I'm still interested in asking it. How many watches do you decide to make? So with the Urwerk, you're releasing 20 for sale.
Yeah.
Why not 30, or why not 10 or 15? How do you land on the number?
That's a great question. So our initial order was actually for 15 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And then it grew to 18 because Gabe and I fell in love with it so much that we each wanted one. And then the third one was going to be the press piece, and then eventually go to our retail partner, Goldsmith and Complications. And as we continued through the project, we just felt it was something that we were so exceedingly proud of that we wanted to make more. The challenge with independent watchmakers, though, especially a house the size of Urwerk, is they are limited by simply how many watches they can make in a year.
Yeah.
So increasing that order to 24 watches in total. I don't know what Urwerk's annual production is this year, but I'd have to imagine that's somewhere between 10 to 15% of their annual production.
Yeah, it's a big chunk.
Yeah.
So
I think it's probably 200-300.
Totally. So it becomes both a practical matter of production and also just a realistic question for them. They had other UR100 that they're working on that utilize the same base caliber, and there's only so many of them that they can and the same thing with Josh. Josh Shapiro, when we made the P1, there's only so many. In that case, there was only so many movements he had access to. That was number one. But there's only so much time that he had to actually make those watches, and so we're limited in that regard. Now, when you go to the C series, it's different because we are generally, or at least to date, we've been working with watchmakers that are far more industrialized than an independent watchmaker is, and with that, it's a little bit more challenging. Our first one, the Zenith, to be candid, the reason we did 50 is that's what they told us the minimum was.
Yeah, fair.
Sure.
So we're like, okay, got it. But from then on, it was based on also our thoughts on trying to model, how many we would sell to the group and how many would go to new members, as well as what our, where we wanted to see growth. So with the C3, which is coming in October, we are making significantly more, more than twice the amount of watches that we've made previously. And while there's certainly, a financial risk to that, we believe that we're ready to grow the community to that size, and we think that this is the right watch to do it with. So that's why we decided to target a larger number. But we also were very cognizant that to do that, we had to keep the price, more reasonable, which is why that watch is going to be under 10 grand, probably somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 US. So, that's something that we bear in mind as well, which is the total number of production is also based on cost.
I think we should talk about this Urwerk. It's a brand I find really interesting, not because both the co-founders, in fact, Martin and Felix, could equally be watchmaking geniuses or Bond villains, and the products fit both. Felix, you've met them.
Yeah, I mean, I would. On my collection,
it's a compliment
of independent watchmakers / Bond villains, they wouldn't be at the top of the list.
Really? Mm-hmm. Martin Frank, you wouldn't even need to change a thing. The outfit, the name. Anyway.
It's just the stylish black and white photography. It goes a long way.
I'll put you, Martin absolutely would be a great Bond character.
100%.
We'll roll with that.
Okay, so you've got this watch. It's the Urwerk UR100VP.02 for
Yeah.
collective.
Yeah.
Tell us about this watch.
Oh man. All right. So let me start just by saying I have never met in my watch life two guys who are as absolutely open-minded and thoughtful, creative, passionate, happy guys as Martin and Felix and everybody in their orbit, no pun intended. They are absolutely wonderful human beings. And we got introduced to them through our friend Danny Goldsmith, who just opened his new watch boutique down in Florida called Goldsmith and Complications. He introduced us a couple years ago, and it was a long conversation with them because they've never done a collaboration with anyone other than a watchmaker and actually Macallan Whiskey. They did something with Macallan Whiskey, but they've never done anything like this before. And initially, I think we needed to show that we wanted to do something special and different with them. And both Gabe and I, really were enamored with the UR100 platform to begin with, even though the complications on the original model, the current model, are somewhat esoteric. But we were really enamored with it, and we got to thinking, about what we wanted to say with this watch, and what we wanted to do was to bring Martin and Felix some fertile creative ground where they would be able to really run with it and make a watch that had something really special to say. Now, while this was all happening, COVID was hitting Gabe in my hometown of New York City. And, aside from the absolutely horrifying personal toll, all of the institutions that Gabe and I grew up with were being just financially brutalized. All the museums and art institutions and what have you. There's one museum in particular that Gabe and I both grew up going to and loving, and it's called the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. And it's if you've ever been to New York City, it's a 1950s World War II era aircraft carrier that's moored in the Hudson River. That's a museum now, and they have a massive collection. I beg your pardon?
Hard to miss.
It's hard to miss. It's absolutely, and it's a really cool museum. Has all sorts of fun military and civilian aircraft, and in their collection is the Space Shuttle Enterprise, which is the prototype of the Space Shuttle program. So the Enterprise never actually went to space, but it was the spacecraft that was used to test and prove how takeoffs and landings would work, so that when they launched the next generation orbiter, they had confidence that they would be able to land the thing. And we were able to build a relationship with and a partnership with the museum, where they provided us access to Eric, who is their curator of space and aircraft, which is just an awesome title, and a genuinely lovely man, just a wonderful human being, who became our co-collaborator and worked with us against the brief. And the brief of this watch was to create a watch that would celebrate the experience of flying the space shuttle. And we all agreed from the beginning that, we didn't want to make a black and white watch. We wanted to make something that really felt distinct amongst space watches, and yet still was connected deeply to the space shuttle. So this watch has two extraordinarily unique complications. As the wandering hour hand moves around the dial, it goes through the time, which it would be where you'd see traditionally between 4 and 6 o'clock on a traditional watch face. And as it moves into the first aperture, which is between 9 and midnight on a traditional watch face, you will track the exact process and the steps of taking off of the launch of the spacecraft, of the Enterprise, or any space shuttle for that matter. And then as you get to between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock on a traditional watch dial, you will track the process of re-entry and landing of the space shuttle. And the color palette, the design of the indicators, the application of the loom, the choice of the strap, which is evocative of the restraints on the space shuttle, are all pulled from archival imagery and original gauges and meters from the space shuttle. Because what's interesting about the Enterprise is that the Enterprise was this bridge between the old school sort of I mean, I'm reluctant to say pre-computer because technically there were computers on the Apollo capsules, but not in the way that we think about them. So the pre-computer, pre-glass cockpit era, and then where the space shuttle ended, which is sort of on the cusp of the fully computerized glass cockpits that we see inside of Dragon capsules now. So this is really an ode to that. And the thing is, Martin, if nothing else, is enamored of those kinds of traditional old school cockpit gauges, and he uses it as a design language. And that's, I think, really what helped us bring this together. So, and I'll add one last thing, and I appreciate both you and your listeners letting me talk at length about this. I'll shut up in a second. But we wanted to make sure that the experience was complete. So, we created a mission patch to accompany the watch. Cool. Those are available on our website for a couple bucks. You can get them there. Trucker hats with it as well, because we wanted to really bring together the team aspect of it. We completely redesigned the manual of the watch, believe it or not. The manual has been redesigned to be evocative of the launch manuals that would be Velcroed to the outside of your spacesuit if you were piloting the space shuttle. So you can actually follow along in the manual, all of the specific technical stages of takeoff and landing, all of which have been validated by the museum against the technical literature. And we even produced a short film about this watch as well, because we really wanted to make sure that we were able to tell the story. And as a result of all this work, we're also going to donate a not insignificant amount of the proceeds to the museum, because it's an incredible institution and one that we want to be around for many, many years to come. So that is the P02.
Even, in a podcast format where we can't, sort of see the watch, and I do encourage everyone to, check out the show notes and have a good look at it, because it really is quite cool. That's a really good and clear example of what you were talking about earlier, the difference of collaboration or a limited edition. Yeah. That sounds like like a really genuine three-way partnership between yourselves and the museum and the watchmakers that goes well and beyond. Like redesigning the manual, who needs to do that? Like that's who bothers to make it, to NASA-ify it. That's so cool. I don't really have a question.
I actually forgot to even mention the box itself has also, we changed the box. So the box is actually built in a way where when the watch arrives, it looks as if it is a piece of mechanical equipment that's been mounted on the brackets of the dashboard of the Enterprise. Should add that.
You've actually given me time to remember my question. Who pushed? Who
that was my intent.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So, who was pushing all this? And who was there any pushback? Like, was it you and the Intrepid team going, "We want to do this. We want to do this," and were Felix and Martin like, guys,
No, that's what's so amazing about this project. I spend any time working, trying to build a watch, and inevitably you will hear the phrase, "It cannot be done." Usually that's tied to a supplier not wanting to produce something at a minimum amount, or it could just be somebody not wanting to just do the thing that you're asking them to do, and that's fine. What's amazing to me about Martin and Felix is I never heard that. It was always, how do we do that? Or how, or like, what can we change to make that work? And it makes sense, when you look at Urwerk and the kind of watches they make. I mean, like no rational person, sets out to make that watch. Like, you have to be a little wild. You got to be a little crazy. And even though the watches are expensive, those guys make, what the AMC is a multi-million-dollar, piece of hardware. But when you think about, when you actually break it down and you look at the time, the energy, the resources, the actual production cost of these things, like nobody's getting rich doing this. These guys are doing this out of love and passion, and the cost of the watch is tied to how few of them there are, and their willingness to push the limits and to not say it can't be done, but rather their open-mindedness of saying, how do I do it? So what we saw was this ping pong back and forth between Martin asking questions of the museum getting archival responses and coming back with an alternative idea. I mean, at one point we thought about shipping the watch in an entirely new vertical box because the shuttle bay doors, so to speak, only open when only opened when the spacecraft was oriented in a specific way on Earth, and we're like, oh, we should have the box resemble that, etc. The only person who I think would help control that is a gentleman named Remy, who runs this sort of sales and business side of Urwerk. And occasionally Remy would be like, just so you guys know that might derail this project. And you're like, okay, Remy, got it. Cool. Thank you. but it was never, it can't be done. It was like, yeah, sure, we could do that, but you want this watch this year, right? You're like, all right.
You want people to be able to afford these. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the other catch too. We always we set a target price, and we pretty much hit it, because we want it, I mean, look, in no way is 62,500 US not a truly magnificent amount of money. But I hope that for those who were considering an Urwerk or would look at a watch in that class, that this watch holds its own, if for no other reason than it tells a really special story 40 years after the conception of this spacecraft.
I mean, I had a question on the price, because after chatting to you for an hour, it's very clear how passionate you are about all things watches and about these projects, and it's not sort of half-assed. It's very, it's very serious, and you kind of mentioned a few times the amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah.
Is this something where these collaborations come about, and the pricing and the goal of this business, being a business, is to kind of cover a watch for you and Gabe each? Is that sort of is that the goal of a collaboration?
In transparency, we're a little more ambitious than that.
Okay.
But we do
totally
need
fair.
to.
I love it.
Yeah, but I think that's a great question, and I'm happy to talk through how we price. We believe very strongly that in order for a watch project to work, it has to be a perfect Venn diagram that works equally for Collective, the company, for our members, and for the manufacturer. Everybody has to have an equal share of the value. And early on, what we noticed is that you'd speak to brand X, and let's say that the watch that we were working on had what was a stock model, and the price was $5,000. And they would come back to us and say, well, we made some modifications. So it's now going to be 5,500, and your margin will go on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we refuse to do that, and we still refuse to do that today. We believe very strongly that it's not the responsibility of our members to bear the weight of making the company successful, and that if a watch manufacturer really believes in the watch that they're making, then why would they treat us any differently than someone that they would wholesale that watch to in a more traditional channel? And we don't inflate the pricing to cover anything other than additional costs, and we don't take margins that exceed standard retail margins. And that is something that we believe in vociferously. I mean, we don't want to be in a place where we feel like we are contributing to the inflating cost of being a watch collector beyond what is necessary to justify the time and the effort and the energy spent to deliver the watches that we're making. And that's something that I will stand behind with every project that we do.
Yeah, I think that's very cool and kind of unusual, I think, in this day and age. One thing that also I think is a reality of making exclusive watches in 2021 is the fact that you have to be prepared that they're going to be sold on the secondary market for more than retail.
Mm-hmm.
Do you in Collective have rules around flipping watches, or how do you deal with that sort of scalping and premium thing that seems to have infested other parts of the hobby?
In infested indeed.
Martin comes after them.
Exactly. Martin knocks on your door. No, there's a couple of ways to answer that question. So first of all, we believe that when you buy a watch from us, it's your property. So full stop. So if you want to keep it, we love that. If you decide that you want to sell it, that's your call, and there's no judgment on that. The only caveat to that is that if we determine that the sole reason that you are a member of Collective is to buy and then immediately resell our watches, we will remove you. That's never happened. So it's not something that we're worried about. I will actually counter that by saying, though, that I think it is important to make sure that people don't feel like they're trapped. And, when you consider, what it would mean financially to be a member of Collective over time, you would have invested a not insignificant amount of money in our watches. So as a result, we want to make Collective membership sustainable. So we actually have a partnership with Hodinki. They are our certified pre-owned reseller as of late June. What that means is if a member wishes to sell a Collective watch, they can do so however they want. But if they wish, they can sell directly to Hodinki, and Hodinki will resell the watch, and then we'll also include a extract from our archive at Collective, which will accompany it. And we do that for two reasons. One, we want to make sure that if a member sees another watch that they want, so let's say, for example, a member who's purchased, the C1 and the C2 sees the Urwerk, the P2, and they really want it, but it's out of financial reach. But if they sold the Moser and the Zenith, it might become more attainable. Well, we want to help them be able to do that. And this is one way to provide a very simple way for them to sell to a reputable source and be able to get the cash to either reinvest in a Collective watch or to do with whatever they please. And then, conversely, that's also a way for folks who are not Collective members who maybe don't have an interest in the community aspect to be able to get a hold of a Collective watch that they might have admired. So, I don't necessarily, have, and neither does Gabe, have any issue with a member selling a watch at any point, except if that is, if profit is the sole purpose of their membership in Collective.
I love that. I don't think we've mentioned the price of a membership yet. But I imagine it's reviewed every year.
Zero. Membership costs nothing other than investing in one of our pieces every 2 years. And
the crate of Daytonas.
We better head over to Collective Horology. Shut up. Stop mentioning Daytonas. Sasha's least favorite watch, Felix. We better head over to collectivehorology.com and get some applications in, Felix. Grab that Australian
we'd be humbled.
Australian crew. Alrighty, what I want to ask you. What has been the personal highlight of Collective for you?
I mean, I started getting interested in watches when I was in high school. I bought a Skagen for $100 when I was on vacation with my parents in Maine when I was like 15 or 16. And I fell in love, and over the course of the 20 years that followed, especially the last 10 years, when watch media, has become so critical to the education of people coming into the space. Just getting to I mean, look, just getting to talk to you guys, Felix, I've been reading the things that you've been writing for years, you're somebody that, and I know this sounds corny, but I really admire you, and I've learned a lot from you. And
very nice.
I've seen the same from, other journalists that I look up to that have educated me, and just to be able to be a part of creating, and putting some of these things into the world that's part of an art form that I admire. I mean, you spend your whole life. I've spent my whole life working largely in corporate America, and I went to school for theater. So for me, I love storytelling, and I've spent my whole life telling other people's stories. And it's been really kind of special to be able to choose the story ourselves, and for Gabe and I to be able to do that, and to make it sustainable, and to meet the people that we admire, both who are the creators and the critics. And, I don't know that there is any one thing. It's just every day, every time we go out for dinner or for drinks, Gabe and I will literally look at each other and just be like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I don't believe that this is happening. and I hope we never lose that. It's been magical.
It's a mic drop.
Well, I'm going to lower the tone a little bit.
In typical Felix fashion.
Because it's what I do.
Someone you admire. Here we go.
It's true.
Look, now I feel slightly bad about that in a very heartfelt and considered answer. I'm going to throw it all away for a cheap gag.
Yeah.
So you work in, you work or collectives members work in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of tech sort of people.
I do.
Yep.
The majority of our members don't.
Okay. But I want to know, you're probably a bit better informed on this than we are down here in Australia. What's the watch equivalent of the Patagonia vest?
Well, you may not know this,
but collaboration coming.
But a Collective is a Ventura, California-based business, as is Patagonia. And our office is about 1 mile from Patagonia corporate headquarters. So there's my filler while I try to figure that out.
No, that's pretty good.
Okay, so you mean in Silicon Valley, like what is the most commonly seen watch, would you say?
Yeah, or like that sort of status, like that part of that uniform. Is it just an Apple Watch?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're talking about like, there was a period, I think, where I think tech executives kind of followed the sort of the trend of like the general market, where it's like anything that starts with a 57 is of interest.
Sure.
You know what I mean? What's interesting to me now is that there is a skew towards sort of two buckets. One is towards precious metal sports away from steel, and then the other is independent watchmaking. I am seeing people within the communities that I'm part of becoming far more interested in independent watches. And I remember years ago, I think it was like 5 years ago, I had a chronometer Bleu, which I bought, out of the box in the FP Journe boutique.
Sure.
Back when Journe, was not the grade, the AAA bond that it is now. And nobody had any idea what the heck that was. No clue. And didn't care, and now I think that that watch collectors, at least in the Valley in particular, are definitely skewing much more in that direction. A watchmaker that I absolutely idolize, who I think you guys just spoke to, is Max Buser, and for many years, you could walk into Steven Silver in Silicon Valley and walk out with a horological machine or an LM, of your choosing. And I think those days are gone now, as people have discovered, the magic of independent watchmaking and the magic of MB&F in particular. So I think that's the skew. I know that's not exactly, the answer. It's like every dude walking around the Valley wears X, but if I had to trend it, I'd probably say those two directions.
That's a great answer.
Collective Horology limited edition piece is probably the Patagonia watch of Silicon Valley, Felix. Given the tight provenance.
I have to say though, it is pretty neat having their offices right, because they also have their company store right near us, and their company store is I know exactly.
That's cool.
You want to say goodbye to a couple $100 right quick. Head in there.
There's a vest hanging off the chair as we speak. Felix knows that.
Perfect.
A big ambassador for Patagonia. Asher, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, well and truly, when we wrap a show, we ask the guests for some recommendations. I have a feeling that you're going to be packed full of great ones. What have you got for us and the listeners?
Which sorts of recommendations would you like from me today?
Well,
I'd be happy.
Something you've been listening to, perhaps watching, reading. I feel like you might have a good book recommendation for us.
Sure. So my daughter is almost 4. And what I would recommend, whether you have children or not, is that you get the book or books I am reading with her. I ordered, when she was born, the complete Calvin and Hobbes, which comes in 3 giant hardbound editions. It's every original. It's perfect reprints of every single original strip. And I loved Calvin and Hobbes growing up, and I now have the joy of taking her through every single comic strip, which is really, really fun. If for no other reason than she has no idea what the hell a comic strip is, because It's like not a thing anymore. So book wise, if you aren't familiar with or you haven't in years, I encourage you to buy the hardbound complete Calvin and Hobbes, without a doubt.
Solid.
And then musically, because I've been listening to this lately. Despite the fact that he is a well-known watch guy, I will readily admit that I was skeptical, but I am now utterly enamored of absolutely everything John Mayer has been doing with the Grateful Dead. He is been listening. I saw him a couple times with the Dead over the last 3 years, and now I'm tracking down recordings. He is probably one of the best guitar players of our time, and he is able to wear and the Garcia outfit while still having his own unique point of view in a way that honestly I have never seen anybody else do it. So I would just say, for those of you out there who think John Mayer is just yellow, gold, green dial, go check that out and then come back and talk to me. That guy is a monster musician who deserves an absolute amount of respect for what he creates.
Yeah, his latest track, "Last Train Home," is quite.
I just downloaded that EP.
Funky.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's so good. I feel embarrassed because I feel like I never really paid as much attention as I probably should have, and now I have a whole lot to listen to. But yeah, that EP is awesome.
Fantastic. Well, for everyone interested in learning more about Collective Horology, you know where to go. You know where to find them. Thank you so much for joining Felix and I, Asher.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me, guys. That was a really fun conversation. I appreciate you.
It's been an absolute treat. Thank you so much for finding the time.
What a guy, Felix. That was just a lovely chat. Really nice, friendly fella. I can't wait to see on the wrist pictures of that Urwerk, because on all accounts it looks awesome.
Yeah, and I think by now it'll hopefully be live. Otherwise, we're in a bit of trouble. You know what, Andy? Before we do the wrap up, I've worked out what the last of the 5 important places was.
And
it's pretty obvious one in retrospect.
Was it Switzerland?
Bloody Basel. Obviously.
Duh. Well, if you want to, argue with us, hit our Discord. There's a link in our Instagram bio or in the show notes. If you want to email us and tell us how wrong Felix was about his list, you can email us otthepodcast@gmail.com. Or if you want to like our Instagram photos, Felix, what's our handle?
ot.podcast, and that's where you can also send us messages or comment on things saying how right I was.
Send us pictures of your big timber. And thank you to Tag Hoyer for supporting the episode. We appreciate you all listening, sharing, and give us those 5-star reviews. We will see you next time.